So, hi and welcome to the next episode of Deep Talks. Today, my guest is Felix Zeltner, co-founder of Work Awesome. Hello and welcome. So, Felix has the same interest as I do. They do conferences about future of work, about company cultures, how to improve those. And I'm very happy that you are my guest here in New York because we both live in New York. We met here, and we are drinking my favorite Japanese green tea again. So that's the signature drink for my podcast. So Felix, welcome again, and let's dig into it. Tell me, what is your estimations? Like, what do you think that the future workspace will look like? In
what
5
number
years?
of years? In 5 years, so near future.
Okay, yeah, we can discuss both actually.
So I think near future regarding I just returned from one of the largest innovation future gatherings in the United States. It's called South by Southwest. It's happening every year in Austin, Texas.
A very famous one.
The liberal outpost in Texas, a growing boomtown, one of these cities in the United States that have themselves seen tremendous growth, being kind of like a forefront of the future of living themselves. And in Austin, Texas, every year there's it's hard to estimate because it's so many people. Some say it's 100,000, some say it's 400,000. I don't even know. As a journalist, I should know. I don't know because it's now about 8 big events, all of kind of like intertwined. But the biggest and most important one out of all of these is called interactive. And interactive means it's technology, it's privacy, it's the future of work, it's entertainment. And what I took from being there for a couple of days and being in these hundreds of panels and meeting so many people from all over the world is there's definitely the biggest concern right now is about what is AI and what is it doing to us? And it's very hard to answer that question because in order to answer this question and look into the future of work and how much is getting automated, what artificial intelligence is going to do to our work, we have to first define what it actually means. And it becomes very tricky because as other buzzwords that we all know, like blockchain, like big data,
right,
they are being used not only by people who treat them very seriously, but also by people who just use them for marketing.
Yeah. Like bullshit,
right?
Empty phrases.
So at a conference like South by Southwest, there were maybe 200 panels that had the word artificial intelligence in them, but maybe only 10 of them were actually dealing with actual, buildups of artificial intelligence. I'm making this number up, but it's kind of like a guesstimate.
Right.
So out of all of this discussion that is going on and this kind of fear that's building up in people, because now everybody has heard it, nobody really knows what it is. It's very hard to make a distillate and say what is really there. And the other thing that was very interesting at South by Southwest West this year, I've been coming there since 2011, so for quite
and next
a
year,
while.
I promise
next year we're gonna go together.
Right.
Was that this huge discussion about artificial intelligence is now being also taken over by politicians. So for the first time at this big tech event, you could see half a dozen presidential candidates showing up. What never happened before. Obama was there a couple of years ago. That was like a big one-off. Bernie Sanders was there. But this time, almost the entire Democratic Party was there. Very interesting. So what are all these politicians looking for there? The EU Commission was there. From Germany, I think we had a half a dozen ministries selling delegations to this event. So what are they all looking for? And I think a lot is orientation. So we're now entering a phase where the artificial intelligence, all these other buzzwords that came from the tech world are entering the mainstream. And over the next 5 years, I think we will see politics and economics trying to catch up with this and see what it actually means for their day-to-day operations. So what that means for a German government, let's say, they're now trying to come up with a paper that defines artificial intelligence and the regulations that should be in place to, prevent it from being evil. Basically.
Isn't it too late? like because it's already out and it's under control now. So
yeah, I think that's the big fear, and I'm not sure whether that's true, because when you talk to people that are data scientists, they will tell you a lot of what's being called AI is just statistics. And the artificial intelligence, like the so-called neuronal networks that are built from these statistics, they're in their infancy. So, people that say, oh, the robots are coming, they're threatening us, I don't think we're at that point yet. And I don't think we'll be there in 5 years.
That's very difficult to say. Like, for example, Elon Musk, he's very afraid of future with AI. And I was studying AI. I have my major from like information science, and I had a lot of subjects on AI, and it was like 5-10 years ago, and still it's growing exponentially. So you cannot estimate if it's gonna be in 5 years, 10 years, because you can have that tipping point, and you cannot predict what will happen after that tipping point.
Elon Musk is interesting that you brought him up, because he's obviously one of the big voices in the future world that first said we should all be scared, right? When you look at, though, what this means for Elon Musk as a businessman is that he has a large organization that is bound to this topic of artificial intelligence. And so who's benefiting of him saying that? It's first and foremost his own business. And this is something that, now looking at the future of workspace for a while, I have seen over and over again. If you see studies, numbers coming out, it's very important to look at who's benefiting from these numbers and these headlines being created. And who's benefiting of Elon Musk saying that we should be scared of AI? First and foremost, I think it's Elon Musk.
I somehow believe him that he's not that guy who do things just for his benefit. I really believe he had some like greater thought, but I'm not sure about that, of course. But I believe him more than I believe, for example, some politicians. So for me, still, he's a responsible guy.
Well, I'm a journalist by trade, and a couple of years back, I was writing a story about Elon Musk, and I got the chance to get close to him at an event with NASA, and just see him speak. The NASA event was very important for him. That's why he showed up in person in Washington, D.C., because they're his biggest clients. He had I think his NASA contract is about $100+ million.
It's much bigger than the whole Tesla.
Exactly. So he was there. He came with his private jet and sat down with these people. And I could immediately see the mood in the room change when he came in. He has an aura that ignites people. Like, this guy had such an energy around him. Then you I don't know. It's just like he's like a leader. You want to follow this guy. Like, and if he comes up with an idea, you want to pursue this idea. And even the astronauts in the room, the serious scientific crowd, got so excited. I was like looking around. It's like, this is crazy. This is he's not an astronaut, and you're like cheering for this guy.
Yeah, they're
like
trained to be really calm.
Not at all. Like, they were having posters. And,
really?
Yeah, it was crazy. And I really realized, okay, this is a person that, like, few can, get people excited about the future and about being an entrepreneur and about trying out things that are impossible. And this is really what I love this guy for, that he has these ideas like the Boring Company.
Right.
I will dig a tunnel underneath LA because traffic sucks.
Yeah, LA needs this. Yeah.
Right. And you say, wait a second, this is impossible. And he says, well, but I'm just going to try. And that is what I love him for. I don't love people as much who say we should be scared of the future. And he did that, and I was like, all right, okay. But fair enough. Okay. We should listen and see what it means.
But we already see some drawbacks of AI, like in China. Like, their new credit system there is scary, isn't that?
Yes.
Like, it's very scary. Like, they can recognize the face, and then they can like connect all dots in huge databases, and they can really see, like, if you are interacting with those people, that they have those opinions against government. So this is scary for me, and it's really worse than Orwell predict in 1984 book.
What is your mobile phone provider here in the States?
T-Mobile.
Okay, so I'm Sprint. So T-Mobile and Sprint know that we are here right now.
Yeah.
Google knows that I'm here because I used Google Maps
app.
You maybe have it open too. So Google also knows that the two of us are sitting in this room right now.
Yeah, and so they know all our conversation because we use
and they might
Facebook
even listen.
chat and app.
Yeah. Right. So the question is like, how far are we? And this was also a big discussion, by the way, at this conference I just attended. Like how much of our privacy is actually left, and how much have we actually already accepted of not having it anymore?
But here in the US, you still have First Amendment, and you have some like laws, and you have a system that works, not perfectly, but it works. But in China, you don't have those kind of freedoms and rights. So that's why it's scary to me, because I'm fine with that. Okay, Google is listening to my conversation. I'm fine with that. But if the government do that and they can imprison me, or they can somehow, I don't know, decrease my freedom, that's much scary.
Right. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I have seen people, going to China and being very excited about, especially coming from my home country, Germany, which is still a country that has a lot of cash in daily business. Like when you go to a store, paying cash is still very normal and accepted. And when German business executives now go to China and they realize every transaction that I make, if it's at a parking garage or at a little local store, is all WeChat. It's all on the phone. It's all using this one app. They get very excited about the seamlessness of it, but of course it's also super scary. And I couldn't agree more that when it comes to systems like in China, where government is basically regulating technology, that's scary as hell. The thing though is, I see now the EU standing up, and it's really interesting, this mess that Europe is and has always been of different parties fighting and discussing, how great that now can bloom in the technology age, where all these different voices come up with actual smart ideas and are not afraid, because there's a lot of people in a lot of different countries are not afraid to stand up against the Googles or maybe also the Huawei's of this world. Because what I just learned, and what I think is really crazy, is 5G. So the next the fifth generation of mobile technology, which is gonna take over the world over the next 5 years. And it's so fast that you don't even realize anymore, basically, if something is being uploaded or downloaded or loaded at all. So the little things that we know as tech people, when we go to a website, they see, it's running through 10 servers right now. Okay, this is a website that gets pretty much
I remember
all
first
my
time
data. This is not going to happen anymore. You won't see that anymore. You won't see if a video is being uploaded. It's gone. It's all like just there in an instant. And I think this is, for us, for our generation, this is going to be a huge change.
I remember that I was downloading first computer game through internet, and I was like 6 years old, and the game had 1 megabyte, and it took 1 hour to download that. So I remember that I was sitting there 1 hour and literally like watching to every small step. It was crazy.
It was exciting.
Yeah, and it was exciting, of course, because then I had a game that no one had before. So, yeah.
The status bar is such a genius invention, which gives you this illusion of there's something is actually progressing. But it's all gone. It's with 5G, there won't be any status bars anymore.
So probably our kids, they won't know what that is. They will not know progress bars at all. So everything will be instant. So so the future can be a bit scary too. So we should be responsible, and we should really think about all like drawbacks and setbacks that future can bring. But still, like, it's happening, so we cannot do many things about that. So, for example, as you said, like governments are trying to somehow regulate AI, but I think it's too late. Like it's happening, and it's gonna be here before we realize what the AI really is.
So just one little example. We organized a panel too in Austin about the future of work, and we had a representative from the Canadian government with the Secretary of Labor from the German government sitting there next to each other. And she, from the Canadian government, she told us how she came up with the first AI paper of Canada. And what she did was, and I found that really badass, she opened a Google Doc on her personal account because her government email account wouldn't allow her to do that. And she started a draft in this open Google Doc. And it was an open document. It means if you and I would want it to be collaborative in this document and have our own ideas, we could go in there and comment, edit, whatever. And at the end, she had 300 people working with her in this document. And at the end, Canada had their first AI strategy on paper. And it's done. It's trying to give AI definitions, levels, and it's a great way, I think, of showing how the next generation of politicians are going to work, because our generation, the World Wide Web is now 30 years old. So it's one generation. They're coming into politics now, and they can create a strategy in Google Docs, and they don't need 10 consultancy firms anymore. So I found that a beautiful example of how today you can collaborate on such a difficult topic, but then actually create policy.
And Estonian government, they already use blockchain for 10 years now. So we can copy some of their ideas too. Like if there is someone who really did a great job, so the European Union or US can really inspire in the Canadian strategy.
Yes.
Still like an artist.
Yeah.
So let's back to the future of work. So the AI is one trend. What are the next trends? What are the others?
So I guess one visible trend that took over Austin and took over the entire west coast of the United States in the last couple of months is related to the future of work, and it's the future of mobility. So in Austin, when I landed there, this is a city that in the early 90s decided against having a great public train subway system. They decided against it. It was a small margin, but the public said, we don't need that. But then it became a boomtown. And out of a sudden, this boomtown didn't have a good public transport. So when I, as a conference visitor, this mass event come to town with 100,000 other people, it was a mess. I had to rent a car, buy a bicycle, take a very expensive rickshaw through town. It was always very difficult to get around because Austin is a downtown that consists of a lot of conference hotels. They're all being used for the conference, and you have to move all the time between locations. And it was a big mess. Then Lyft and Uber came in. So one year we were all using ride-sharing services, but then they got kicked out again. A huge mess. And this year I come there, and the first street corner I see 10 e-scooters. And I'm like, what's going on here? Is this like a promotion? Because there's always crazy promotions at the conference. Is this like a promotion from some company? And then I learned over the next couple of days that Austin now has 4 different e-scooter companies competing with each other for urban transportation. So what you do is at every street corner, even in residential areas, you pull out your phone with whatever app you want to use. You go to a scooter, you unlock it, and then you scoot away, and they're really fast. So out of a sudden, this transportation in the city was completely disrupted. It's dangerous too, because scooters are fast. Nobody's wearing helmets. Nobody knows how to do them. That the people in the cars are like, damn, what's going on with these scooters? On the sidewalks are too narrow, so people are like scooting in between passerbys. But everybody was using them, so they were clearly solving a huge pain, right, for the city. And then I learned that now not only in San Diego and in LA, other cities in the West, this is moving eastwards through the United States, actually in Brussels, in Zurich, maybe even in Prague.
In Prague,
Poland.
They deployed this project like half a year ago. Now, like the government wants to fight against that because it's dangerous and it's unregulated. But still,
disruption.
It's disruption.
It's huge disruption. In Germany, just a week ago, I think the first pilot started because our regulations, of course, they're always like the tightest. So it took longer, but the pilot project is on the way. And this one company, I think it's called Bird, was the first startup that got on German roads. So this disruption is huge. It's happening right now. And in Austin, this kind of pilot city, because it needs so much urban transportation, there's not only 4 e-scooter companies now, there's 10 e-mobility companies competing for your attention. So you can have e-motorcycles, you can have e-bikes, you can have little e-cars. It was crazy. I've never seen anything like it. And I think it was probably the biggest change from when I compared this conference from last year to this year that happened when you look at what's happening next. And it's interesting that it again is rolling from the west coast of the United States to the rest of the world. Same, by the way, with cannabis legalization, also coming from the west of the United States, taking now over the rest of the country, and then probably spanning off to other countries. Yeah, of course, in Europe, there's already.
Yeah, we will see how this works too, because we don't have a long-term data. So maybe we realized in 10 years that those people, I don't know, have a higher risk of Alzheimer's disease or something. So I'm a little bit, even with the AI and even with cannabis legalization, I'm more skeptical than other people. Like I'm always like, okay, let's see the data before we deploy something on a large scale, because for me, it's about to do some experiments and then deploy those big ideas. Here, it's like we deploy them and then we measure and see the outcomes later.
And this e-scooter thing is a perfect example because it was chaos.
Yeah.
And then sometimes you walk around and you see it looks dystopian, like in a zombie movie. So you come to a street corner and it's like a pile of 20 e-scooters just dead. It's just somebody just dropped them there. And you look at it, it looks like, oh my God, this looks bad. Like this is weird. This looks like kind of something bad, really bad happened and the zombies kind of took over. Because there's no regulation. It was just deployed, right? So it's crazy. This is what this country is famous for, just doing stuff and then, we should maybe have done something different.
Yeah. Because you know that it's really difficult to predict the outcomes in complex systems. Like more the system is complex, the more difficult is to really predict how some new things and ideas will change the system in 10 years. So for me, it's about doing some prototypes. Like, for example, in Europe, they were discussing that basic income, and they really tested in one city, and they gave that basic income to people there, and they measured if, I don't know, the unemployment rate went up or down, the happiness level went up or down. And if we have a good prototype, then we can like deploy the idea on a large scale. But without that, it's so dangerous. And today, like the innovation are much quicker. For example, with cars, it took, I don't know how many years that everyone has a car, but now it can be like 1 month and everyone is using that. So I'm a bit skeptical. And
because you're European.
Maybe, yeah. Is that the main difference you recognize in here? Like the main difference between US people and European?
Well, it's kind of mean to generalize like that.
Yeah, of course.
I've been living here. It's my 7th year, and it's definitely one of the. Thank you. It's definitely one of the big differences in mentality that I have seen is here having less of a sense of historical context or weight, and just saying, yeah, let's try it, and we'll fix it later. While in Europe, it's always been like, yeah, you know, maybe we should, because in the past, this and this didn't work out. Also, we have always done it like that. Let's be conservative. Let's be a little more traditional. Let's base it on what we already know and be very, very careful. And I think that's also why the two cultures do so well together. Yeah. I'm very, very happy that I got the chance to come here and experience this other culture and bring them, and you bringing some of my skepticism and my like slower pace to here, and then be influenced by this rapid culture here, and then make the best out of the two. And I think that's a big privilege, actually.
And when we gonna be back in Europe, we will be outliers too, because we will be faster than they are. So
yes,
we will be outliers in both cultures.
Yes,
that's great.
That's the maybe the downside of this privilege is that you're then the American when you go to Europe, and you're the European when you go to America.
Right? Yeah.
So you should basically live in the middle in the Atlantic on the Azores or somewhere.
So you are here now 7 years, so it's quite a lot. So what are your like other experiences with differences here?
Oh my God, there's so many. I mean,
because for me, I'm here just half a year, so I see some differences, but 7 years it's like 10 times more. So
I love these differences. Like I could just like pour out love about being in a different place than where I come from for hours. I guess the first, so that the very first big clash that happened for me when I came to this country almost 7 years ago was I drove on the highway, and after a while, I got stopped by a very, very angry policeman. First of all, because I was too fast, and second of all, because I didn't pull over the American way. I pulled over the German way. The German way is to take the next exit and not stop on the highway.
Okay.
He was very, very angry. He was shouting at me like this, close to my face, which I had never experienced. And I was very, very sorry because I was just still German. So I was thinking in the German Autobahn pace. I was thinking in the German way to stop. And it was the first time I realized, okay, dude, you can't be like, you have to adapt, okay? And you have to like be a little careful. And the guy was very, like, in the end, he was friendly. If I would have been American, if I would have been maybe another ethnicity, this might have ended differently. And so that day, I also realized, okay, not only I have to play by the rules of this place, I also have to be happy about where I'm from, because this makes a huge difference here. I'm being a German in the United States, being a Central European in the United States is a privilege on its own. Because this country is still so influenced by our home countries, and still the roots are so deep that we are being welcomed here. And this is a thing that sets us apart widely from other nations,
makes
and people
easier
from other
for
countries.
us. Yeah, right.
And the second thing is, sticking with the traveling, it took me a long time, actually until last year, to visit all 50 states. It was a big goal that my wife and I
already did
set
that?
up. Yes.
Wow.
So it was like a big goal. We wanted to be in all 50 United States.
So maybe you are more experienced than many Americans are.
Maybe.
Probably.
But there's also many foreigners who live in Germany who have seen more of Germany than I do.
Probably.
So it's just a curiosity. And being in all 50 states really taught me it's not a country, it's a continent. It's bigger than Europe, and it's so empty that as a German who comes from a very densely populated place, we're 80 million people in this tiny piece of land in Europe. This is something that is very hard to get into my brain, how empty this country is. There's just like a whole lot of nothing. And this also creates a mentality that is very, very different to where I'm from, where neighbors are always around, right? No neighbor is far away from me.
Europe is very small, actually. Like, if I take a plane from Prague, I can get to, 10 capitals in 1 hour, 1 hour and a half.
Right.
So, and you see that like everything is really interconnected. Here, if you have a flight from New York to LA, it's basically like from Lisbon to Moscow or something.
It's
like
crazy.
it's so far away.
Yeah, and this is also why this country runs on planes. Why are Americans flying so much? Like, why are they polluting the world, right? Because it's the only way you can maneuver on this continent. If you have a company and it has 2 offices on both coasts, you can't drive. And one of my great American experiences when I came here for the first time was I had a scholarship, and it was a travel scholarship, so it made me go around the country, and I fell in love with the country. And one of the best parts of this trip was I took the train, the Amtrak, from Sacramento, so San Francisco, California, this kind of corner, all the way to Chicago.
Wow.
It's a 52-hour
52, come on.
train trip.
Wow.
And it's epic because you start at the ocean, you go into the snowy mountains, then you go to the grasslands, to the desert, and then you end up in the lake region. So you see a lot of the beauty that this country has from your little train window. But you also meet people that only this country has. Because who goes on a train, right? You usually have a reason in this country to take a train, because normally you don't. So there is people on this train who have religious beliefs that make them take the train. There's people on this train who don't have any money, and that's why they're on this train. There's people on this train who are total outlaws and don't want to have anything to do with society at all. That's why they're on this train. So if you go on this train yourself, you will meet all these people, and all these people you will probably only find in the United States. So this is one other difference, I think, then that the history of this country shows that the Europeans that came here, they were always a little bit different than their European peers. Might even count for us, but even more so for the religious extremists that came here, the pilgrims, the explorers, the crazy people, right? So this is, I guess, another big difference.
What I feel here is that it's much wider. The differences are much wider, like compared to, I don't know, Prague or Nuremberg too. Like, I think that there are not huge differences between people. Like everyone is just similar. Like if I take my classmates, there are like little differences. Right. But here, if you are in subway, you have like really wide, maybe the widest difference rate you can ever get, and that's so special. That's why I love New York so much, because you always learn new things, and subway here is amazing. It's dirty but beautiful.
It's the great democratizer in New York, because rich, poor, whatever ethnicity, whatever borough, whatever social layer you come from, you all meet on the subway. And also, I think for a lot of I'm just making this up because I'm an American myself, but I think if you come from a place like Minneapolis or from rural Kansas and you move to New York City, it's the first time you go on a subway. It's the first time you are in a city that allows you to walk to places, and it's the first time that you're exposed to every other language and culture there is in the world. And this is also, I guess, it's somewhat similar for us Europeans. We see a lot of things that are familiar here, and so many things that we have never seen before. And that's why I love being here. It's just the beauty of being exposed to the entire world every day.
And let me discuss one very important part of your life. Like if you Google Felix Zeltner, you will find a New York Times article about the thing that Felix and his wife and your first kid, you moved around New York and you lived in 12 neighborhoods in 12 months. So tell me about that experience, because it sounds so interesting. So,
well, thank you for saying that's interesting, because some people think it's just blatantly stupid. And other people say, don't make such a big fuss out of it. It's the normal New York experience. Okay. Everybody's doing it all the time. But what happened to us was that when we had our first daughter, Emma, we got home from the hospital. We were living on the Upper East Side in Manhattan. At that time, we had our first ever apartment, which we dearly loved. And we come home from the hospital with this little tiny human, and we find a letter in the mail kicking us out of the apartment. So that was a very weird moment, because you have everything, and then they take the rug underneath you and pull it. And we were struggling to find a place, because we had a baby for the first time. And also we didn't know much.
And you wanted to focus on a baby, not about
anything,
not to solve moving or stuff like that.
Anything that's an existential threat or change when you have a newborn is even more extreme. So we were not experienced in New York. We had lived here for 2 years. We didn't know much about the whole apartment game, about real estate. So we were struggling to find a new place. We found one in Brooklyn eventually. So we moved to Brooklyn with our little baby. And after a few months in Brooklyn, our landlord decided to raise the rent by $400. And so again, at the second time in the course of few months, we were looking at being kicked out of our place against our will. And then we started to be like, how should I say, we started to turn the tide for us, because now it's on us to turn this into something cool. We're not going to mess with these weird landlords anymore. We're going to do something, we turn this into something fun. The idea was, because we had...
Sorry for the interruption, but it's so cool. Like, you had 2 bad experiences and you started doing the same again and again and turn it as a good experience. That's amazing. Like, you can really do this in many other domains too. Like, this is so cool.
I hope so. Well, my now wife, we got married here in New York. My now wife, back then girlfriend, we had always traveled a lot together. This was always like one of our like really dear to our hearts, and just exploring, spending all our money not on buying a home or a car, just going out there and getting a ticket into the world. And so it was somewhat natural to us to apply that to New York then, and say, hey, what if we just travel the city for a year and look at every borough, because we can't decide where to live next. We were like, so where are we going to move? We've tried Manhattan, didn't work out. We tried Brooklyn, didn't work out. What are we going to do now? We want to live everywhere in the city, but how do we do it? So that's how this idea was born. And then we just went to I remember that night, we went to a little pizza place and had a beer, and little Emma had her toys. And we just, on a little paper, started writing down neighborhoods that we always wanted to live in. And we thought, maybe we can live in all of these for a month, because some of the neighborhoods in New York that we loved, we knew we couldn't afford.
Okay.
Some of the neighborhoods we loved, we knew we maybe wanted to try them out, but not for a long time, right? For example, Staten Island or the Bronx, we knew it was far away from where we had to go every day. So, but for a month, why not, right? And so this plan was coming up. And then, you know, as it is, when you live here, you have parents in another country, you call them every day or every week. You have this kind of routine. So the next call came up and we told them about this idea, and the reaction was, let's say, semi-enthusiastic.
I can imagine that.
And they were not loving this. But it made us maybe even go a little bit harder after the idea. Because we're like, okay, now we have to show our parents that it's not a stupid idea. So we're like gonna do extra, put extra energy into it. And then a friend of mine showed up out of nowhere when I told him about our idea, and said, I have an apartment for you that you can have for a month. And I was like, okay. And I told Christina, my wife, was like, we have an apartment that we can start. It's there. And so one day, 2 years ago, we ripped everything out of our Brooklyn apartment. We gave a lot to Housing Works, which is a nonprofit that has always, I can only recommend it. It has always provided us with furniture. Now we gave everything back. And we put a lot on the street in Park Slope in Brooklyn, where we were living. There's an entire kind of like carousel of things on the street that people put out and other people
I saw many things on the street.
It's amazing. I literally put things out that day. I still remember that. I put things on the street, went up to the 3rd floor to get something, came back down, they were gone. I still don't know how this works, but it works. And it was a very liberating day, because it was like, okay, we're starting a trip. We're still in our city, but we're going on a journey. We're packing our bags. We're going light. We're going minimalist. And of course, you know, we weren't minimalist in the beginning, but we got rid of a lot of things and moved to Long Island City in Queens, which was our first stop. And there we started thinking, so how are we going to do this now every month? And so I went on Airbnb, and I thought, maybe I can just book 12 apartments in 12 different neighborhoods. And then I realized, okay, this is going to cost us like tens of thousands of dollars. Maybe not, right? And just as naively as I'm telling you this now, that's how we were, right? We lived this, and there was no idol or thing to plan to guide or plan to follow. So we just figured out day by day. And then from day after day after day, we found an apartment in Chinatown. We found a place in Harlem. We got scammed, of course. We paid money to an apartment that didn't exist because we were stupid, right? And all the time, more people started picking up on this idea. Not only New Yorkers, also people in our home country, in Germany. So while we were doing this crazy experiment and had a lot of stress and problems in the beginning to figuring out the logistics of moving and dealing with our kid, who then got enrolled in a daycare here in Chinatown, while figuring all this out, more and more people wanted to know what would happen next. And it became almost a movement. Like people wanted to know, what is this crazy family doing next? And now I can say it was probably the best idea we ever had.
And you said a beautiful sentence today before we started recording, and it was something like, moving is the new way of living. And I really love it because it really describes my life now. I live like 50% New York, 50% Prague, maybe 10% in Tokyo, so 110% altogether. And I really think that that's the future of living, like to move more, to experience more places, more cities, not to buy a house to stay, but to rent things and be really minimalist. I think that we are the first generation that can be minimalist because we can travel, we can move, and that's why we are minimalist, because we have to be. So, and you're planning to look. You wrote a book about that.
Yeah, because
and your book's gonna be published in April.
That's right.
So tell me more about the book, because it's so interesting to me.
Well, there was never a plan to turn this into a book, but at some point, I guess also because we were journalists and we were starting to tell our story more and more, at some point media picked it up, and then book agents came to us and said, you should turn this into a book. And we were like, why not? We're journalists, we can write. We had, of course, again, no idea, right? Because writing a book is definitely not like writing an article. It's another planet. But we said yes. And then spent almost a year turning this experience into a book. What helped us a lot, writing a book about it, because we didn't want to write a book about how cool we were as a family moving around, because it was not. We didn't find that interesting. But what helped us a lot was we hosted dinners in every neighborhood that we lived in.
Oh.
So what we did from the very beginning was, once that month, we invited our neighbors, we invited people who had shops on the street, we invited people we read about in the newspaper who were doing something in that community to have dinner with us.
That's so cool.
And then we put an audio recorder in the middle, and we asked basically just one question: what is your neighborhood story? Why are you here? And to me, this still gives me goosebumps just thinking of it, because those were some of the most beautiful moments and nights I had in New York City. Just having these people around the table and talking about their house, their street, their neighborhood, their emotions towards change, their emotions towards their own life's decisions. And we met a lot of very fascinating people that we would have never met in New York City, just because we had a free dinner and we're a family that were there for a month and we're very vulnerable. And we didn't know anything. We were just in this neighborhood for 4 weeks. Like, what do you know about a place when you lived there for 4 weeks? Basically nothing, right? So through these people that were in these neighborhoods for a long time, they gave us keys to open new doors into New York City. And this also, I think, made it a great experience for us writing the book, because we could go back to these people, dive into these stories, learn more about the neighborhoods, and combine that with our own, framework of moving. And it actually was a great joy to give these people and their stories now paper and words and this platform to expose this. Because New York City, what we learned through this project is not one city. It's actually like a universe, and you have very, very, very many very different planets who are all moving at different speeds. And when you look at gentrification, which is such a big pain in the city right now, so basically luxury apartments being built instead of affordable apartments, in every neighborhood, the speed of this change is moving at a different pace. Something I had no idea about.
Yeah, for example, Chinatown, we are next to Chinatown, and Chinatown is fixed. Like there are not many new buildings, but if you compare it with, for example, the district next to the Hudson Yard, it's brand new, but it has no, I don't know, I don't like that place that much, because all those skyscrapers are the same. It's metal and glass, and it has no vibe as Chinatown has, for example, for me.
Well, Chinatown was one of the most fascinating neighborhoods we lived in, because when you don't speak the language and you're not immersed with the Chinese culture, people just ignore you. And this is also what makes living here beautiful, because you can, everybody's mind. I saw an ad on the subway the other day, and New Yorkers have a PhD in minding their own business. And this is what Chinatown is all about. This culture that is living here for generations, they don't care about us. They have their own problems, their own business, their own families, and they own a lot. So a lot of the families in Chinatown own, and they're not selling. And this is how I think some of the reasons why Chinatown still has as we would see it as Europeans, intact old structure of families, communities, businesses,
and even everything is interconnected.
Yes,
and everything's very close to. So it's like village in a city, or city in the city.
Right. But it's also why they don't care about us, because they were always on the edge of society. Like, these Chinese immigrants were basically not treated well or not accepted for a long time in this country. So when they built these communities, and in New York now you have a Chinatown in Manhattan that's very old. You also have a new one that's in Flushing, Queens, that looks very different to this one. It's glass and new structures, but it's also Chinatown. You see that they're just doing their own thing. They have their own bus lines. They have their own labor market. They have their own, of course, language that is not mingling with English. And it's all built by them for themselves. And to be just a guest in that for a while was a gift. The same, by the way, in Harlem. Harlem is, or at least parts of Harlem, are still a very tightly knit community. They welcome you, but you're never really going to be part of it. But you're welcomed as a visitor, and that's it. And you can be in their lives for a while. And to do that was really, when we moved from Chinatown to Harlem, it really felt like moving from the old hutongs of Beijing to Senegal, and it was amazing.
So, can you somehow summarize the key lessons you learned from that experience? Because it was 1 year, many small experiences, but can you somehow, I don't know, distill or somehow sum up the key findings?
Well, one thing that made us think a lot was, of course, is moving damaging to our family? Is moving damaging to our child? Is moving damaging to my relationship with my wife, to just our core life here in New York? And a lot of people were also criticizing for us for doing this with a 2-year-old. And I guess the fact that our child was so young and didn't have friends that she was leaving behind every month.
Oh, right, yeah.
But also the fact that we were, as the three of us, a very close team, gave us the learning of, it's not about the four walls around you, not at all. It's just about this. And this was, for me, one major learning, that for our child, this moving, she did not care. She could have cared less. It was about us being around her, and maybe her little crate that we carried around with her toys, because that she knew these toys, and everything else didn't matter. And yes, it was also because she was very young, but it was also a beautiful experience, because it sometimes when you think about living in an apartment, you think that you're attached to all of this, but I don't actually think that's true.
Right. I don't think that's true too, because I moved a lot in the last 4 years. I moved like 5 times. So, and I left many things behind, and I don't feel that I'm missing something. Like, I can really move into one suitcase and put everything there and move here, and I'm fine. I'm not missing anything. So I think that the attachment is just illusionary somehow, like that you think that, I don't know, you really have to have that old, I don't know, statue or something you bought 10 years ago, but you don't. You really don't, I think. So you said that you are minimalist too. So how is your minimalism?
Oh my God. Yeah, that's you're obviously asking me this in the wrong moment, because we just had our second child, and so we have a new human, and with that new human comes many, many, many new things.
So it's not like 1 + 1 is 2. It's 1 + 1 is.
Well, it's a great. I mean, I'm so thankful because we have people that send us clothes or hand-me-downs from other children of theirs, or that just send us gifts. And so, once that new human arrived, a lot of things arrived to our home that we also need and also want to have. But it also means that minimalism is like, forget about it, right? And we have come up with a basic rule. The basic rule is, if a thing comes into the house, another thing has to leave.
Okay.
Not a human, but a thing, right? Yeah. So if I buy a t-shirt, another t-shirt has to go out.
Oh, that's clever.
And I have been trying to follow this. It's been very tough. But this is still my big dream, to keep this philosophy going. If I buy a new pen, an old pen has to go.
My colleague Adela she has the same rule with her nephews. If she give them a new toy, they have to get rid of another toy. So like they always have the same amount of toys, and it really is clever, I think, like to teach the kids to, like, if you want to have something new, you have to say bye-bye to another thing. Right. So yeah.
And of course, also with the new family that we have now, a lot of help is coming. So I can only sit here because my wife is right now at home with our newborn, and my mom is taking our other daughter to the zoo because today is a school's off day. So there's also a lot of things that come in terms of like our circle of humans is just getting bigger because we now need help. And being a minimalist and asking for help is also something that you maybe wouldn't think of in the first place. But it's a big reason for how this concept is working when you grow your circle. And I just talked to a couple that is very minimalist. They run their entire company from a sailing boat. Which a lot of people, again, it's like with the moving project, say this is impossible. How can you ever do this? But they can. It's remote work entirely. It's managing teams remotely entirely. It's being mobile, and it's being very, very minimalist. And so what she told me when we just met in New York, because they were visiting, she said, we went to stores in New York City and looked at a lot of beautiful clothes, and I was standing in front of this one shirt for about 10 minutes, and I was thinking, should I buy this? And if I buy it, because they have the same rule, what do I throw out? And she couldn't, in the end, decide what she was gonna put out or leave or give away, so she didn't buy it. And I was listening to this and I was like, that is the end game of minimalism. When you actually decide you're in another city and you're in front of beautiful things and you decide, no, I'm fine without this.
I follow minimalism like last 5 years, even before it was cool. And now I really feel that I have just everything. Like I have everything. I don't need to buy another t-shirt because I have my 10 black t-shirts, and I buy new things in the moment that some other things are destroyed or old. But I don't really need new things now. And I'm happy with that because I'm here in New York 3 months now in a row. And I bought nothing, like nothing.
How many pairs of shoes do you have?
2.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah. And I survived the winter here with 2 shoes, so.
That was actually one of the biggest annoyances to me when we had the moving project. For about half a year, I only had 1 pair of shoes. And I like to run. So it was basically running shoes. So I had to wear the running shoes to meetings and things and to events. And I felt very awkward. It was great because having 1 pair of shoes is very liberating. But it really, really was getting on my nerves at some point. And now I'm back to like shoes, 3 or 4 pairs.
So. Definitely agree. Yeah. And girls, for them, it's, I think that to be minimalist is much more difficult than for guys. Is like they need more shoes.
So my wife actually is very good on the shoes. She's wearing these. They're kind of like made out of rubber, and they're so you can they look very, there's very beautiful design, but you can wear them summer and winter. And I think she has a lot more shoes at this point than I do. So
Really?
Yeah, because
Wow.
she found these like universal shoes that she can wear everywhere. But it's, you know, then you have the kids' shoes and the baby shoes, and it's like, So this couple that lives on the boat, I asked them also, like, how many shoes do you have? And they said their husband and wife, every one of them has 7 pairs of shoes, because for the boat they need like, I think, 3 different ones. Then they need 2 for the city, and then I think they have 2.
But still, it's
extras.
like 10 times less than normal people.
But I said 7. That's a fair number. I mean, I don't live on a boat, but maybe that's a good number to look at.
Still minimalist.
Yeah.
So, and now I want to discuss more like your conferences, because you do conference in Berlin and in New York City. So, and both conferences are about the future of work. So how many years you do those conferences?
So I think it was 4 years ago when my friend, now business partner, came to me with the idea of me as a journalist going into the conference world. It was not about the future of work then. And we then experimented around, and things went very well. And then it was actually in 2016, so now 2.5 years ago, when we for the first time tried to put on a Future of Work event in New York City. It was the first time ever. We thought about a name. My friend had this awesome idea, so we called it Work Awesome.
Actually, the brand is so amazing. I really love the brand, like Work Awesome. It really describes like
it's really about what we do. Yeah, and our mission was from the very beginning to not be scared, but to empower people for the future of work, so that you come to this event, you meet this community, you hear people teaching you things, sharing things with you, sharing learnings, and you leave empowered. And you think, yeah, I can handle the future of work. I find ways, strategies, tools that I can use to be better with it, and to be better with my team and as a leader with it. And 2016, that was, it was the day of the Brexit. I will never forget. Because on the stage of the conference, we looked at the results, because we were 6 hours in front of, or 5 hours in front of London. So at the end of the conference, we're looking at it like, it looks pretty good, guys. Have a safe way home. And the next day we woke up to the first of many shocks that have now spilled over Europe over the last couple of years. I'll never forget. But it was also the start of us looking seriously into what the future will bring to the work world. And besides of politics not being on this level at all to think about the future in many countries, unfortunately, right now, what we realized in the startup community, and now also in the corporate community of large organizations, is there's this massive need and also pain being felt for change with the digital era, with the new generation of workers coming into the workplace that don't care about careers, they care about health, they care about family, they care about a nice place to live or to work at, and not work in a cubicle. And we saw all these things evolving, and then basically tried to get them together in a journalistic way. So instead of saying, we're going to do a big networking event and there's going to be lots of booths from companies showing their products, we said, no. What are the most interesting stories on the future of work? What are the most interesting trends? And who are the most interesting people standing or are able to explain these trends? So the same way I would write a feature article about the future of work, that's how we approach the conference business. And so in 2017, we founded the company Work Awesome, and we hosted a conference in New York and in Berlin for the first time. So right away, we took the concept back to our home country. Fortunately, in the same time, the company grew from 2 to 3 founders. I met my now co-founder, Lars, who is also a journalist from Germany. He had just, when we met, written, I think, the first ever big magazine piece in Germany about the future of work. He knew everything and everyone. And when we put this first event together, he immediately said, let's take this to Germany. Germans are defining themselves through work. It's it's a hardworking, competitive society. They're all thinking about this. Let's bring this concept of work awesome to Berlin. And it was an instant success. So now we're divided between two continents. We're still a small company, but we are now trying to empower people for the future of work in Europe, in the United States, and also bringing the two continents together.
It's funny because when we met for the first time, we realized that we do many similar things. Like we also do a conference about corporate culture in Prague, conference about leadership, and I do consulting on how to improve workspace last, I don't know, 8 years, 10 years maybe now. So for me, it's very important to really help companies to find new ways, because as you said, like there's a new generation and they really want to do something meaningful. They don't want to be they don't want to work just for money. They need more freedom. They need more open home offices and so on. So what are the trends you experienced in the last 5 years that are really shaping the current situation?
I mean, you can maybe split it into 3 different major categories. So one is working. And the way we work is dramatically changing. It starts with the fact that we can leave our office, or we have our office here if we want to.
Of course. All those distractions are there even in workplace. So it's both ways.
Right.
Like you have your office at home, but you have your home at office.
Right.
So you have your Facebook
in order to have our offices here, we need lots of tools, which is a major way work has changed. So now we have myriads of tools available that can help us or prevent us from being more collaborative, from working remotely, working mobilely, so that the technology of work is massively impacting the way we do our everyday business. Email is still huge, but it's the suite of tools is getting bigger and bigger and more complex than ever. Slack is probably one of the best examples for how a kind of ancient idea of chat has completely disrupted the way teams and even entire organizations work together today. And another way I think working is really changing is in the way of like co-learning. So you don't have a way in a company that insights go from the top down. Insights are created everywhere and need to be shared everywhere, and they can come from everywhere. So learning as an organization is much more complicated and faster than it ever was.
The shift between top down and bottom up is huge. Like, and it really influences like all decisions companies are doing these days. So I think that this is the major, transition between the extrinsic motivation that you had those hierarchical structures, and now you try to empower the freedom at work and so on. So that this is one of the main transitions.
So the 3 areas I try to look at is working, which we just talked about, then hiring and leading. Hiring, I just went to a community meetup of human resources, people who work in New York in large companies, from Walmart, the biggest company in the world, down to small startups. And the people who work in human resources today have such a difficult job, because human resources, a classic human resources work in the past was you had applications coming in, you were looking at these applications, you were making up your mind on it, and then you put them on a yes or no stack. And then you would distribute them to the respective teams or leaders in the company. There would also be, of course, people in the company that you would maybe help getting somewhere else. And of course, sometimes when lawsuits were coming up, you were the go-to people. But you were also kind of disregarded as just human resources. Now human resources is everything. So their job descriptions change. They now are people ops or head of people or whatever.
Head of cultures and head of culture. Everything. Yeah.
The way applications come in have completely changed, because people don't send applications. They maybe start a startup or work remotely. So you have to go to the talents and say, don't you want to come? So you have to start communicating. Super hard, super new, right? And then technology. So now you have maybe the chance to collect data about your employees, but also about people on LinkedIn or wherever. So the entire, way of finding, recruiting, retaining people it's like, I think it's like Napster in the music industry.
Yep.
Everything is on head over heels, everything. And it's very scary if you're in the human resources industry, because you see that you kind of like everything is kind of like everything know is dissolving. And there's so many new things to digest that it's very hard to keep up. So
a lot of technologies and a lot of trends to follow. So you basically need 10 people, and it's so wide the range of those innovation. For example, I have a very good colleague, and he's working on a chatbot that is helping to read the CVs and to recognize which one is good, which one is not. And he really basically was starting as a HR director, and now he is developing a chatbot. So that's so different.
Right. Yeah. So we have started working more and more with human resources people, because we see next to the way of working, the way of hiring is one of the fields that the future of work is really, really, really having a big impact. And the people that come from the HR world are also, it's a growing community that you also include in ours. The first community in New York that we were connected with was the startup community. These are people that always live in the future, they're always fast, they're always lean. But then when you look at these big human resources departments, you realize the pain points there are so high, we need to bring them in. And the third way, there's working, hiring. The third big field we look at is leading. So what does it actually mean to be a leader today? How do you lead the next generation? How do you lead in a responsive way? How do you even define leadership positions in your company? When you think about, there's now new job descriptions, for instance, head of diversity and inclusion. What is that? Why do you need that? What does that do to your organization? What does it mean to be a diverse leader? Or you think about jobs like head of innovation. Isn't innovation everything? It's very hard to be a head of innovation, because it means, okay, I have to transform the entire organization, but also there's a CEO. So there's now new roles in leadership, and of course also new ways of leadership that are very, very they're very interesting, very exciting, but also it's a huge topic, and it's very difficult for many people to figure that out. So these are the three areas where we're trying to help people get empowered for the future of work.
Yep, I definitely agree that leadership is also very important to learn. I see the change between like the old leadership and the new leadership. Like the new leadership is about values, purpose at work, freedom, innovations, and the old one was about, as I said, extrinsic motivation, to have some, fixed structures. Now, like, I think that if you are working with big corporations, like you see that they are scared because they don't have those fixed structures, and everything is moving so fast that, for example, startups, they can survive because they are quicker. But for big corporation, I see that they really are sometimes very lost in those innovations, because it's so messy. As you said, like there are so many things to follow, and everything is changing so fast. So maybe this is the future, like really to be happy in chaos, and be happy in situations that are not fixed, but they are opened.
And I wonder, what you think about productivity in this context, because of course, productivity has always been a part of our conferences. We always try to give people tools and strategies to be more productive. One of my favorite examples is how I get through my inbox every day, right? This is something people are discussing at every one of our conferences, and they want to know. And there's tools and strategies. My personal one is I try to look at yesterday's inbox as today's to-do list. So I try to, take a day to respond to emails, sometimes completely failing, but I try to stick with that strategy and not be scared by the inbox of today, but to take, just one little example. But how do you think about productivity when you look at a company like BMW or Johnson & Johnson or GE? Like, how will large organizations in this messy new future that you just described tackle productivity?
I think that's also about minimalism, like to teach people to write only short emails. We did a large project in one big corporation, and we really set up the new rules for meetings that they should be like only 30 minutes. We set up new rules that every email should be only 2-3 lines long, and to really like teach people why simplicity is so important, because everyone can write an email that has 2 pages, but no one understands, and it's very ineffective. So in my like for me, the future of work is about small teams and very simple communication. Maybe not to use all the apps, but choose only one app and use only Slack, for example, and don't use other tools, or really to try to like be for example, my good example is if I go to Japan, I uninstall my Facebook there, and I'm there without Facebook. And I did something similar at my work. I stopped to use email for 1 month, and I went to Japan, and I realized that I have 3 more hours daily. So it's a lot. Like people are spending like with email hours and hours, and it's very unproductive because you are like reading all those emails, and you are like trying to find what is important, what is not, and at the end, like you at the end of the day, you feel like, what I accomplished like 50 emails. Is that accomplishment? And mostly you answer 50 emails and you get 60 emails back, and you answer those 60, you get 70 back, and it's growing like exponentially sometimes. So I don't think that email is like the worst thing we have now for communication. And I really think that we have to go back somehow and teach people to really be minimalist in communication, and set only 3 priorities and focus only on them, and not to try to do 30 or 50 priorities. So that's my way, and I really believe that it can really help companies to really be simpler inside.
But how would you want to get rid of that written communication? I think it's kind of isn't it kind of impossible, at least to the outside world? Like I have to communicate with my clients somehow, or my customers.
I do the same even with my clients, and I'm trying to explain them that if I'm like strict, if I use only one sentence, it's not that I'm unpolite. It's the best way how to communicate. So I teach this system to many of my clients, and they are doing the same now. So
one-liners.
Yep.
Okay.
And I have one training, like 2 hours presentation about minimalism at workplace. So, and there is a lot of beautiful quotes. Like I love the quote attributed to Pascal that follows like, I could write you as a simple letter, but I didn't have time for that. And it means that write a simple email is much more, it's much more time consuming than write a simple one. So sometimes it's about to really be polite to people and write only little one-liners, and not to try to express yourself in five pages. And that's the problem of US. People are doing a lot of small talk here, and for US, for German, you see the difference here that people are much more.
So funny you say that.
Yeah.
I just had a discussion with a language trainer about this. So he is with his company. They're 2 husband and wife team. They run this company that is teaching business English to non-native English speakers. So when you have a German literally translating German into an English email to an American person, it will sound very unpolite. If you have an Israeli person literally translating Israeli use of language into business English, it will sound impolite even to a German, because they're even shorter in their and faster in their approach. If you have an American person writing a business English to a Japanese person who speaks English, even the American person can sound very impolite to the Japanese. So imagine an Israeli-Japanese collaboration on email. It will never work. Because one side will always think, are you nuts? Like, why do you write me an email like this? You're the unfriendliest person in the world, or you're wasting my time like I have never seen before. So I like your concept of one-liners is very interesting, but I guess you will always need an explainer down below. This is why I write one-line emails. Actually, and I'm not trying to offend you.
I actually had that explanation there many years.
Okay.
Really explaining why I'm so strict, because
because there is cultural differences, and you won't. You can't erase them.
I definitely agree with that, because I do a conversation with my publishers around the globe. So I remember that I was talking to my Japanese publisher, and it was 2 times longer than the conversation between my US publisher, and 2 times longer than my German publisher, and so on. So you definitely like described the real situation. And that's the future of work too, because we have to cooperate and collaborate with the whole world now. So,
so what do you do when you communicate with your Japanese publisher? How do you face the fact that it will be impolite if you do not play by their communication rules? How do you?
I always trying to explain that my value is simplicity, and that's why I'm communicating in that way.
And how do they?
I don't know. I don't know if it's impolite to them. I hope not, but you never know. But if you take a huge corporation with like, I don't know, a few thousand employees, and if you count the number of time that they do these small talks, that's so expensive for the company. So
I love these cultural differences. Even us journalists who are wordsmiths, who like their craft is to be good with words. I heard a friend tell me that they had a London office, journalists, right? London office, New York office, and American writes. So London office asks New York office, "How do you think this article was?" New York office writes back, "I think it was quite good." London office says, "Thank you, appreciate it. Next time again. How do you think we played out the new strategy?" New York office says, "I think you played it out quite well." So the day comes, New York office actually visits London office. And then the colleague comes at some point and is like, "Hey, I really have to ask you something. Why do you think we're doing such a bad job all the time?" And the New York person is like, "But what are you talking about? You're doing an amazing job, and I'm telling you all the time." And the London person is, "No, every email from you is like, is we're doing terrible." And it's like, "No." So what they found out in the end was it took a long time. The word "quite."
Okay.
The word "quite" for a London person, if I say you did quite well, it means it was shit. If I say this to a New York person, it means that was amazing. It's just this one word. So
this is great.
Different contexts, different places. So I don't even know if it will ever be possible to, and I think it's also beautiful that these differences exist. But I don't think, especially in Slack, email, like conversation is more written than ever now. I think it's better to celebrate these differences than to try to erase them.
Yeah,
maybe.
Right. Because if you are in different contexts, it makes you more open-minded and you appreciate differences more. So, and we need these virtues in this interconnected world. So maybe more we collaborate around the globe, maybe more, maybe we vote differently, maybe we I don't know, approach people on the streets differently. So for me, it's good, but sometimes it's unproductive. And you asked me about productivity. So from productivity perspective, it's not the best thing, but from culture perspective, it's very useful.
So cultural, we can be unproductive.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
That's nice.
That's nice. Yeah, we can survive that. The last part of my podcast is always about you as a person. So I want to ask you, what are your core values? Like, you can go deeper and describe me your personal values.
My personal values. So, well, I hope, I hope the like when you boil them down to one-liners, they always sound like these one-liners you see on Instagram, like carpe diem. Right? But I think, we talked about this. I think simplicity is the highest form of sophistication. Is something that I'm really trying hard to get to. I'm not there yet. Maybe I won't ever get there.
Yeah, it's more path than the destination. So
yes, to not have expectations, maybe, is something that I really like living. Also very hard, but I try to. Sometimes I'm very naive, right? And this is part of this concept. To not have expectations means also that things go wrong, and I like failing sometimes when it doesn't affect other people badly. I like it a lot because I think it's one of the most efficient ways of learning,
and it's part of freedom. Like,
right?
Yeah, if you try new things, you can fail, and if you fail, well, it's better than you didn't try. So for me, failing is a part of the learning process too. Like, it's so important.
And I mean, now, like, values, it's such I don't even know how. I never thought about writing them down or anything, but bringing people together is definitely something I live for, and connecting people and see what beautiful can happen just through that. That's definitely a core value. And I'd also say that now that there's now little people and like parent people, and I'm kind of like in between, being super intuitive about my immediate surroundings and not trying to have like too many rules or like written strategies when I deal with my now 2 children or with my parents, but generally just being grateful every day. Because since I came here, I think this is what I learned every day, to be more and more just amazingly grateful for whatever experience I have here. Because I mean, it sounds really cheesy, but I try to do a lot of yoga, because not only for my body, but just does me well. And some of these yoga teachers, they give you, when you're like in a real state of, your mind is almost shut off, they give you these little phrases, and they stuck really well because you're very open at the end of an hour of moving. And this teacher said the other day, no matter how bad your day was, it's somebody else's fairy tale. And it's very cheesy to say that, maybe to some people. It totally struck me, because living here in this place, it's a very aspirational place for a lot of people, and a lot of people really want to be here and they can't. And just because I can doesn't mean that I'm better or cooler or smarter or whatever. I'm not. I just had the chance to come here and had the fortune of taking that chance, and that's all. And that's why I'm trying to be grateful about that. And which maybe is the last, I don't know if you can call it a value, but I just love being not where I'm coming from, and then learning more about where I'm from through that. So that's being like living abroad also told me that, to just like how much I now understand about where I'm from,
right
just by being not there.
It was one of conclusions we had with another guest, and he also he has a flat on Prince Street nearby, and we had this discussion like that. Now we appreciate Prague much more because we see the differences much clearer, and we see what is better there and what is better here, and we can combine those. And before that, if you live only there, you cannot appreciate those details because you never think that it can be different. So I think this is very important, to learn about your home more if you're abroad.
Right.
That's so important. And that's why everyone should travel more, because it makes you more humble and more open-minded, and maybe less strict in some extremist opinions and so on. Because I think that if you live only in one place, in a little village somewhere, I don't know, even in US, even in Europe, and you have only your small surrounding, your small world, then maybe you can be more like xenophobic, and you can be more, I don't know, hateful to the others. But if you travel more, it's obvious you are much more open-minded, and you see that like world is about diversity.
Yeah, I'm trying hard to disagree more with people. I think that's super important to just disagree on things and surround yourself with people that don't always agree with you. But what I have a very hard time when it comes to the traveling, and what's a huge like pair of scissors in my head is the fact that this, as I totally agree with you, it's so important. Like our generation has so much access to travel and to go into exploring other cultures, but it's so wasteful. And I have really a hard time, like living in New York, the amount of plastic, the amount of pollution, the amount of waste that our explorations bring that's something I really have a hard time. Lars, my co-founder, just introduced me to this database that's really reliable, where you put all your flights in and you you pay like a CO2
that's cool.
balance for that, but in a way that it,
and they plant new trees.
That's one example, right? So it's just these like tiny things, but still like this, like that's something I have a hard time figuring out. And I was just introduced to a person on Instagram actually that lives a very minimalist life, and she tries to live zero waste. And she collects all the things that she can't recycle or reuse in one jar, a mason jar. And it still works after, I think, a number of years now. Wow. The jar is not full entirely. It's cramped, but and I looked at this and I was like, to do this in the US, that is really a goal and a core value that I'd love to be much better at. Like to just, simplicity, but also to think about, like your actual lifestyle and your environment. And takeout food, which is one of the major joys here in the city, is definitely not the best way to.
My last question, and that's the thing I'm thinking a lot, is that we see that the world today has many struggles, like global warming. You mentioned Brexit, maybe the growth of populism around the globe. Do you think that businesses can really? Do you think that businesses can do an important role of fighting those or helping those problems?
Well, some people here in this country would argue it's the only way to do it. They would say the government, it's a very American thing to say, I trust companies more than the government, while it's a very German way to say, I trust the government more than any company. So it's very hard to answer that, because I'm like in between chairs here. I could either argue as a German or as an American. I definitely don't think it's possible without government. I just don't see it. So I think both have to, while the entrepreneurs can come up with solutions, the government has to put regulations in place that enable these solutions to actually, go to a broader audience. But again, there we are, a tiny country with 10 million people, a little bit bigger country with 80 million people in a tiny place in Europe, maybe have an easier time of distributing regulations all over the place than a continent like this, where people are miles away from each other.
Right.
And millions of miles.
Yeah, and we can do that prototype that works and then distribute the ideas. Like, as I mentioned, Estonia and their e-government, now they are influencing other governments too. So maybe it's the way, like, to really deploy ideas on a smaller scale and then deploy those on a larger scale. Because I think that we have some serious problems, and that makes me sad every day. But I'm of course grateful for many things. But I really believe that we need to do something for those problems and be responsible, even as a businesses, even as citizens. And I still don't know what is the core, what we should do now, but I really feel that we need to do something. So what is your one more question? So what is your like the best idea what we can do now?
Well, people like you should go into politics, and people like
you,
me would, like, we should engage within the communities we live in, and try to go where decisions are made, and we're not doing it. Right. So I guess, you know, start with ourselves is a pretty good idea, and I would love to do that. Maybe collect a little more, you know, knowledge first, but definitely try to engage with communities, because a lot of people. That's actually what I admire about this society here. There's so many people who are doing volunteer work, who engage with their community, who do food distribution, who help elderly. It's a very, because the society doesn't have this, you know,
they
underlying...
don't have social system as we do in Europe, so they need to do that.
Yes, and they do, and I admire that a lot, and it's something that I've been exposed to here in New York as well. How many people are engaged, and now I see it in Germany with my peer group there, since we had you know, the migration. And maybe we now have 1 million new citizens in Germany. How many people are helping every day, teaching, like bringing things, giving away things, helping others to get education, to get along, is just mind-blowing. It's one of the most beautiful things I've seen in Germany over the last couple of years. This private and not like largely
very good news.
media sold engagement that is not in the news every day, but it's happening every day, and it's the vast majority of people who are doing this. And I think that's, you know, if you ask me, like, you know, what we should do, this is, I think, what we should do.
That was amazing. And Felix, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
It was amazing. Like, I love our discussions, and it's great that we record this one and we can share those ideas with the world. So thank you very much. And I'm going to invite you again in the future, and for example, in next year, and we're going to see the progress, if it's getting better and better or worse and worse. But thank you very much to having you here, and see you soon, brah.
Thank you, Peter. Again, thank you for making the world a little more productive. I'll try to write shorter emails now.